Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about A Witch's Sin, which is book one in the Neon Ghost series by fellow booktuber Daniel Greene. And I do want to quickly address two things. One, I am getting over a little bit of a cold, so my voice is not what it normally is, and if there are any awkward video cuts, edits in here, it's probably because I started coughing uncontrollably for whatever reason. I feel fine, but this is the last little bit of that cold that is sticking around. And the other thing, which I think is important to mention here, is I have never spoken to Daniel Greene. There's no weird booktuber backroom dealings going on for me to give this a positive review or anything. I don't think anybody will think that, but just in case, I wanted to kind of cut that off at the beginning of the video because that's not the case. I bought this, actually I bought the audio version and the super nice like deluxe edition that they had. And so yeah, I bought this, and this review is not influenced by anything whatsoever. So, very quickly, what is this book about? We follow Taya Mint as she is trying to get her enforcer's license, and she, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, stumbles into a world of vampires and religious fever that I don't think she was ready for, and honestly, I was not ready for myself. The setting is extremely interesting. It takes place in a giant megastructure, and there are many layers to this onion that we are going to hopefully get to throughout the series. I will be curious on like what the cadence of this book coming out is, but this starts out as a very ordinary, kind of almost police drama in a cybernetic or cyberpunk kind of world, and definitely escalates it to to be honest, something just that I did not expect whatsoever. I did mention, and this is mentioned very early on, that there are vampires here in this world, and I think that that is kind of the linchpin of this entire series, and really this book, and just kind of the wild nature it ends up taking us into. So some of my overall feelings before we get into some of the finer details. I ended up giving this book a 4-star rating, which means I really liked it. I had a pretty good time with this book. I would say I had an interesting time with different sections of this book. I would say from the 0% to the 50% mark, I had a really good time with it. I really found the world and the setting to be super interesting. So as we were kind of getting that groundwork laid for us, I was really into it. And then from about 50% to probably about 75%, there's a lot of stuff that goes on and happens, and I wasn't sure how I felt about a lot of it at the time. And so at the time of the reading, I probably just liked that section. I thought it was just fine. But then that last 25%, so from 75% to 100%, I really liked that. And I think retrospectively, after finishing the book and going back, that middle section that I didn't like as much, I like more because I think it fits better together, the series or the book as a whole, and so it probably bumps that up a little bit, though I do find that there was some sections in there that were definitely weaker than others. I will also say that I have read Daniel's other books, and the improvement in this book is astronomical compared to, I forget, is it the Lawful Times series that he has? There's a novella and a full-length novel. I think there's some kind of Kickstarter special edition thing going on for that as well right now. But I remember, it's been a while since I've read those, but I do remember the writing to not be at the same level as this book. I think if you have been interested in reading some of his works, to absolutely, this is a fine novel to get an entry into and like support him if you want to. And I think just in general, this is a good book. It's a fun time, and there are plenty of elements for fantasy fans who are really going to like this. Don't get too psyched out that there's this cybernetic, a cyberpunk kind of element into it. There's plenty in here for fantasy fans. So now let's go ahead and talk about the setting, the characters, and the plot. And we are going to go ahead and start with the setting here. And like I mentioned already in this video, I fell in love with the setting of this world. I am somebody who has thought the idea of mega structures was always a really cool thing. Like it really started when I was super young. I think I was probably in 2nd or 3rd grade, and we had a project. It was in some kind of like science class. I can't remember the exact details, but they gave us ideas of what we thought the best way humanity could live. Is it everybody having like an individual amount of space guaranteed to them? Was it, maybe it was really focused on like an environmental aspect, but it was something like that. And I remember at the time watching a video on somebody who thought that the future of humanity was going to be humanity living in these like 10 mile by 10 mile by 10 mile, like 10 miles high or something. Maybe not 10 miles high, but extremely high mega city structures where each floor was going to be, you know, basically its own state is kind of how they described it. And I don't know why I can remember that so vividly. But since then, I have always found the idea of these like megalopolises and just these huge space where humanity is kind of all shoved in and you're seeing all aspects of it in one structure has always been a fascinating point to me. And so to have a world that actually takes that idea and runs with it while having it in a post-apocalyptic setting where there's this haze that is kind of poisoned the outside world, I don't know, it really sucked me in. And I think Daniel does a really good job of showing the differences between floors throughout the structure. The lower floors are obviously worse, the higher floors are better, and there's, you know, a gambit in between, and not each individual level, but the different kind of chunks we get into, they're different settings in of themselves. There are different things going on. This world is it's so frustrating to imagine a world like this, and I hate ads. And this world is like full of ads. You are bombarded constantly with ads, and there's like no peace to be had. And to see how those are affected on each individual level, and just all of these things make this setting just something that worked for me so well. You might have different mileage now. You might not care about these megastructure. You might not care about what happened to the outside world. Why was humanity driven into the structure itself? But for me, it was fascinating. And to see all those intricate details as Taya moved through the floors was just awesome. I will say I have not read a lot of cyberpunk. Actually, this is probably would be considered my real first cyberpunk kind of novel. And so that was kind of a format, or not a format, but like a technology setting that I wasn't sure. I have read, you know, super far future stuff, all kinds of different sci-fi stuff, but the cyberpunk genre itself is not something. And so that, like, being another layer of the setting here, I actually really enjoyed, and it makes me want to kind of explore that genre even more. The different kinds of wear, like that's what it's called, for people to have, and how they basically like have tattoos that glow and their eyes can glow, and obviously get the superhuman aspects of it, and the kind of hacking, and, you know, the terminals, that kind of the, you know, what you would expect. I think it's kind of what people want VR to be, where you just kind of like interact with it without really having to do anything. You can kind of do it with your mind, like next level VR. I found all of that to just be awesome, and it made me really kind of want to like experience this world. I wish I could visit it, and I think that was a really cool thing. And that was really the highlight of the book for me, because going into the next part, which is the characters, I didn't hate any of the characters, but I don't think I really loved any of the characters. Our main character is Taya Mint, the main character there, and she is fascinating. She is a deeply flawed and conflicted character who I think allowed herself to kind of be bullied throughout this book and be manipulated in ways where I think it makes sense for her character, but also I feel like she should have pushed back more. I think there should have been more clear guidelines that she would have set for herself, but also I kind of enjoyed seeing her not be wishy-washy, because she had standards, she had things that she felt were important, but the way she ends up being manipulated throughout the story was something I struggled with. I did relate to her, and she had past trauma and how that carried through with her even to like this, to the current timeline we're in. And while that wasn't explored as much as I would have liked it to have been, I think it was explored enough, and it's something that, you know, can be open. There's a scene probably at about the 35-ish% of the book, which I won't go into details what it is for spoiler reasons, but it was a really heart-wrenching scene, and I don't know, it was almost a wish fulfillment scene, where it's something that I'm sure a lot of people will be able to relate to really well. We have another pseudo main character. His name is Oscar. I found him to be an interesting character, but I wasn't really sure what his motivations were exactly. And I think that's maybe part of the book. This is obviously a series. Not everything is going to be completely laid out in front of you for you, you know, giving away all of the secrets. You've got to have something to develop it along the way. He was an interesting character. And a few of the other side characters, I think I actually really liked. Taya has a best friend, and she has this really bubbly personality, and I really enjoyed that aspect of her. But since we're mostly just following Taya, I will give the characters like a plus, because I think she's an interesting enough character, but I wasn't like head over heels in love with her. And I think she almost has like this bratty attitude that some people will connect with and some people might find a little bit annoying. But in general, I kind of enjoyed her hard-headedness, her spirited nature. And lastly, the plot. The plot is always the most difficult thing to talk about in a spoiler-free review. But I mentioned this story starts out as Taya trying to get her enforcer's license, which kind of seems to be like some kind of pseudo-police officer, where they're able to take on contracts and do certain things and have different kind of limitations than the actual traditional police. And she kind of gets wrapped up in something that is much larger than herself, that really turns into a class war, but so much more than that. And I really want to see more from this. I feel like, obviously, this is the first book. I'm going to say this was like a stepping stone book. It's laying the playing field. Of course it is. It's book one. But I really don't think we got even like to just scratching the surface level until like the very last 10-15% of this book. I would have liked to see a little bit more of that divulged in this book itself to kind of hook me into seeing more of the series. But I will say it's thrilly enough, it's actiony enough, it's suspenseful enough. It hits all those main elements that you would want in this kind of setting, that I am very much, you know, looking forward to the next book, which I think is the kind of the most important thing you can say about the plot in a book. You know, you want to continue on. Like, if I had book 2 available to me, it would be very high up on my TBR. It probably wouldn't be an immediate next read. It might not even be on the next month's TBR, but I couldn't see myself going, if the next book was available right now, more than 2-3 months without jumping right into that next book, probably closer to 2 than 3. So that is kind of the best thing I can say about that. It worked for me. Your minds might vary if you're not really into some of the police drama stuff that does take place in this book, but to me, that it all works really well. And there's something I want to say, but I feel like I shouldn't, because it's such a spoiler. I think that it's better for you just to experience it. Just know that if you are a fan of fantasy, the plot, I think, will work for you plenty. So once again, overall, a nice 4-star entry here from A Witch's Sin, which I want to call Neon Ghost because it's the bigger one, but it's A Witch's Sin is book 1. Neon Ghost, I think, is the name of the series. But once again, really, really good time. Let me know if you have read this, if you plan on reading it, any of that thing. And I will say, I also listened to the audiobook. The audiobook narrator is fantastic. One of my favorite ones of all time, probably. She is skyrocketed up my list. She did a fantastic job. But thank you again for dealing with my sick voice, and hopefully not too many awkward cuts in this video. But that is all for me, and as always, have a good one.